and welcome to Nanny Cooks from the Ozark. We're so glad you joined us today, and I want to talk about kind of a serious matter today. You know, we're living in uncertain times, and I don't want to appear like Chicken Little, and say the sky is falling, but in these uncertain times that we're living in, we may need to make some adjustments. You know, we've just come out of a COVID pandemic. There's a war going on, and there's shortages everywhere. We're dealing with inflation. So how do we deal with these things as a family? Let's start out with some what ifs. What if our power grid is compromised, or our water system? What if our modern conveniences are taken away? What if the grocery store shelves are empty? What do we do? I'm not advocating that we pull up our stakes and go live off grid or stockpile things for a year, even though a lot of people are doing that now, and I'm not condemning them at all for doing it. But how can we start small, make changes to answer these what if questions? So basically, we as humans need 4 things: food, clothing, shelter, and transportation. And I want to deal with you today on the food aspect of it, things that we can do that maybe we aren't used to doing to help make our lives a little better. So we're starting a 3-part series today about survival, basically. And we're starting out with just some small things, but things that could make a difference in your life. So we're going to talk about food basic needs in this series. Now then, I want to show you what we're going to talk about today. Today we're going to do a sourdough starter. Now, basic sourdough just starts out with flour and water. Now I'm going to adapt that a little bit because over the last year or so I've been trying a lot of sourdough starters, and I usually failed at all of them. Number one, because I'm impatient. I want everything done right now, and a lot of sourdough starters you have to be very patient. And the other thing, I would have failures, and that was a discouragement to me. So one day I got a book at an estate sale, and I love to go to estate sales or garage sales and get these cookbooks that are usually put out by schools or organizations or churches. They have some of the best recipes in it. And in this book was a sourdough starter that really appealed to me, because you didn't have to add to it every 14 days and do you keep it in the refrigerator, do you keep it out, or all of that. This was just a very simple starter. So I'm going to show you how to do this sourdough starter today. Now I've got a couple of starters that I have fixed, and this one over here I've been feeding and using for quite a while. This one I just started a few days ago, but I wanted to show you can you see this little fine line of liquid here? That's called hooch. Now I know you've heard of hooch before, and basically there's nothing wrong with this. When it shows up, that's just a sign that you need to feed your starter. Now this starter, the one that I use all the time, I set it out this morning, and boy did it go to town. I looked over here and it was running down the sides. So it is very active. And by the way, while I'm thinking of it, it's a tradition that you name your sourdough starter. So I have named this sourdough starter Libby. Libby is our daughter, and I named it after her because it's bubbly and full of life, just like our daughter is. So basically we are going to start us some new sourdough starter. You want to start with either a glass or a plastic container. Don't use metal in it or you'll be disappointed. Now I've already added the dry ingredients to this. Now my sourdough starter, you might call this cheating. I use a little bit of prepared yeast to get it going, and that's how this recipe that I was telling you about recommended doing it. So it has a packet of yeast. It has 3 tablespoons of potato flakes. Now why potato flakes? Potato gives bread a really unique flavor, and it helps in the process of the sourdough also. Then I have a cup of flour in here. Now with this, I like to use about 1/4 of a cup of my whole wheat flour that I grind, and I think that helps the process too. And then 1/2 cup of sugar and a cup of water. Now this is another thing that I change a little bit. Anytime you boil potatoes, you have potato water, right? Well, save that water because there's lots of nutrients and there's lots of things in this potato water that will feed your starter. So I'm going to pour that potato water in here, and we're going to stir it up. Make sure you scrape the sides and get it all stirred up, and it'll be kind of thick, and that's okay. Can you see down in there what it looks like? So what's the next step that we do on this? After you get it stirred up, I'm not going to scrape it off right now. Take a piece of cheesecloth. Now why cheesecloth? Because there's yeast all out in the air. There's particles all over this room that we could just pick out. And also there's yeast in your flour. So if we have a piece of cloth that can let the yeast get through, put it on your jar, put a rubber band around it, set it out on your counter about 24 hours. And then you can feed it again, or you can put it in the refrigerator. Now, one of the things that discouraged me about sourdough starters is you put it on the counter, or you put it in the refrigerator. How do you know what you're supposed to do? It comes down to this. If you use sourdough starter a lot, leave it out on the counter, because you will feed it and you'll always be using it. If you just use it once a month or so, put it in the refrigerator. That slows down the process. And then you will still need to feed it occasionally. And I will have these recipes for you that tells you step by step how to mix it and how to feed it. But right now, we're going to set this on the counter and get it out of the way. Now, once you have a mature sourdough starter, you're ready to make bread with it. Let me get this stuff moved around here for you. Okay, I have already put the dry ingredients here in the bowl. The recipe that I use, and again I will post this recipe for you, is 6 cups of flour. I like to use 4 cups of white unbleached and 2 cups of whole wheat. And by the way, when you're making your starter, use unbleached flour, and don't use water out of your tap if it's chlorinated water. Use distilled water, or well water is fine too. So we got our flour, we got 1/2 cup of sugar, 1/2 cup of oil, 1½ cups of warm water, 2 teaspoons of salt, 1/2 cup of oil. I like to use olive oil, and a cup of our starter. Now this is starter that I took out of this today. Now since I'm taking some out, I will need to feed this again. So we're going to put it in here. Now it has kind of a liquid roasted marshmallow look to it, if you can see that. And then I've got my water and my oil in here. So we'll stir it up. Now, another thing about sourdough starter you need to be familiar with is the word discard. As you feed your starter, when you need to put more of the flour mixture in it, you will need to discard some of it. And the reason that is because if you just kept adding more and more flour to your starter mixture, it would be so heavy that your starter couldn't work. It would just overpower it. So we do what is called discard. You take, in this recipe, you take a cup of the starter out. Now, the first two discards, you will just throw those away because your starter hasn't matured yet. But after that, you save that discard, and you can make a lot of things with that. I've got an example here of some biscuits. They make them so light and fluffy pancakes too. So you're not wasting what you throw away, except the first two times that you use it. Now, I read to be sure and not put this discard down your sink, or you'll be calling a plumber, because it's really sticky. So the first two that you throw away, if you have some hogs or other animals, you might feed it to them, or just put it in the trash. So, okay, that's all it is to making this bread. Now I'm going to stir it just a little bit more. Alrighty, and what we're going to do with this, we're going to cover this with a towel and leave it out for 24 hours. Yeah, 24 hours. The starter is not as fast as if you just used only commercial yeast. So, I've got another hint for that too. I like to, some of my discard, if I'm making my regular bread recipe, if I've got discard I need to use up, I just do it just like the recipe calls, and then add some of this discard, and it makes the lightest, fluffiest bread. So, you might try this. So, okay, well, let's say that we've let it set for 24 hours. And then we put it on a floured board and knead it slightly, put it in bread pans, and then we let it set for several hours, maybe all day would be good too. So, alrighty, there we go. So we talked about discard. Notice I've got my boa on today that my sister made me because I get messy sometimes. So we've talked about the discard. We've talked about different ways that we could use the discard. So I hope you will try this, and be sure and subscribe to our channel, and we'd love to hear from you if you have tried some of these things. And remember, this little line of hooch is not a bad thing too. It is a form of alcohol though. So, okay, now then, I have something else to tell you. Next video, we're going to continue with this series of learning the basics. My husband's going to show you how we make our bacon. We call it hillbilly bacon, and it is so good, and it's lean, and we really like it. So be sure to stay tuned for that. And also, we have a big surprise coming the next video, so stay tuned for that. So I hope you're having a great day. I really appreciate you joining our videos, and like I said, we love to hear your comments. So if you have questions about this sourdough, be sure and let me know. And any of you locals around, I'm going to have several sourdough starters that I'm going to give away. So if you would like some starter that's already started the process, you just get a hold of me and we'll see that you get some. So have a good day. Bye-bye.